Assalamu alaikum. I'm Saiful Islam, your host for halalradio 1, broadcasting live from Sheffield to the UK and the rest of the world. This is the 7 o'clock slot, coming to you tonight and every night throughout the month of Ramadan. Please join us and listen to the stories of men around the Messenger. Tonight we carry on with Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarraah and Uthmaan ibn Madh'uun. Please join us in a small prayer before we begin. Ya Allah, we depend on you. We have no power of our own. When things are going well for us, we know they have come from you, and we have no power of our own. In our trials, we rely on you. In our temptations, we trust in you. Our success is in your hands, and so is our lives. We have no power of our own. Ya Jabir, Ya Kareem, we cannot do without you. Save us from all evil and guide us going out and coming in, now and forevermore. Ameen. So let's begin with Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarraah, the trustworthy of this nation. Who was this man whose right hand the Prophet peace be upon him held and said, "In every nation there exists a man worthy of all trust, and the trustworthy of this nation is Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarraah." Who was this man whom the Prophet sent with reinforcements to Amir ibn al-As in the Dahad as-Salisil expedition and made the commander of the army that included Umar and Abu Bakr? Who was this companion who was the first to be called the commander of the commanders? Who was that tall, slim man with a gaunt face? Who was that strong, trustworthy man about whom Umar ibn al-Khattab said on his deathbed, "If Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarraah were alive, I would have entrusted him with the caliphate. And if Allah asked me about him, I would say I assigned the caliphate to the trustworthy of Allah and his prophet Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarraah." He embraced Islam at the hands of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq at the dawn of Islam, even before the Prophet walked into Jarraah. He emigrated to Abyssinia during the second emigration, then returned to stand by the Prophet at Ubaidah, Uhud, and the rest of the great battles. Even after the Prophet's death, he continued to be strong and trustworthy in his striving during the caliphates of Abu Bakr and the commander of the faithful Ummah. He renounced the world and endured its hardship. He pursued his Islam with an unadmirable asceticism, piety, firmness, and trustworthiness. When Abu Ubaidah took the oath of allegiance to the Messenger and dedicated his life in the way of Allah, he knew exactly what those words in the way of Allah meant. Moreover, he was ready to endure whatever this way required of self-sacrifice, self-denial. From the time he shook hands with the Prophet as a sign of his pledge, he looked upon himself and his life as something that Allah had entrusted him to seek his pleasure and abandon every desire of fear that might distract away from him. When Abu Ubaidah fulfilled his pledge as the companions did, the Prophet saw in his consciousness and lifestyle that which made him worthy of the epithet he had given him, the trustworthy of this nation. Abu Ubaidah's trustworthiness towards his responsibilities was one of the most outstanding traits. For instance, in the Battle of Uhud, he realized from the way the battle was conducted that disbelievers' first priority was to kill the great messenger, peace be upon him. To them, achieving victory was secondary importance compared to killing the Prophet. Therefore, he decided to stay close to where he was. Abu Ubaidah thrust his sword into the army of pagans that craved to put out the light of Allah once and for all. Whenever the fierce fight led him far away from the Prophet, he fought ferociously while his eyes were fixed on where the Prophet stood, watching him with great concern. Whenever Abu Ubaidah saw a potential danger approaching the Prophet, he jumped swiftly to send the enemies of Allah on their heels before they could injure the Prophet, peace be upon him. When the fight reached the height of ferocity, a group of disbelievers closed in upon Abu Ubaidah. Still his eyes were fixed on the Prophet like a hawk. Abu Ubaidah lost his control when he saw an arrow hit the Prophet, yet he recollected himself and thrust his sword into those who closed in upon him, as if his sword were a magic one. Finally, he managed to disperse them and darted towards the messenger, who was wiping the noble blood that ran down his face with his right hand. Then exclaimed, "How can they succeed after they tinge the blood?" the face of their prophet, who invited them to the way of Allah. When Abu Ubaidah saw the 2 rings of the prophet's chainmail that had pierced his cheeks, he rushed and held the first one with his front teeth and pulled it out. Yet as it fell, it took out his upper front teeth as well. And the same thing happened to the lower front teeth when he pulled out the second ring. Now Abu Bakr as-Siddiq will narrate what he saw in a more impressive way to let us hear what he has to say when the Battle of Uhud reached the apex of fierceness and ferocity. The Prophet was wounded, and the 2 of the rings of the Prophet's mail penetrated his cheek. As soon as I realized what had happened, I rushed to him. A man swiftly done the same in the same direction exclaimed, "Dear Allah, accept this deed as a sign of obedience." Then we both reached the Prophet. But Abu Ubaidah was there before me, so he pleaded with me, "Please, by Allah, Abu Bakr, let me pull them out of the Prophet's cheeks." So I let him. Abu Ubaidah held one of the rings with his front teeth and pulled it out along with his upper front teeth. Then he pulled out the second along with his lower front teeth. Thus he lost his teeth. Abu Ubaidah, like all the companions, fulfilled his responsibilities and obligations with great honesty and trustworthiness. Accordingly, when the Prophet, peace be upon him, appointed him as a commander in Al-Kabat expedition, he had no supplies except for the knapsack full of dates. Notwithstanding the difficult mission, the long distance, Abu Ubaidah withstood this against all odds with tremendous self-denial and joy. He and his soldiers marched for miles with nothing to eat but a few dates daily, until they ran out of dates and had to pick up withered leaves with their bows and crush and swallow them with water. Hence the expedition was called Al-Kabat, the struggle. They proceeded regardless of the danger and risk. They did not worry about starvation or deprivation. The only thing that mattered to them was to accomplish their glorious mission under the leadership of the strong and trustworthy commander. The Prophet, peace be upon him, loved this trustworthy one of his nation so much that he gave him preference over everyone else. For instance, when the Najran delegation arrived from Yemen after they had embraced Islam, they asked the Prophet to send someone to them to teach them the Quran, the Sunnah and Islam. The Prophet told them, "I will send you a trustworthy man, a very trustworthy man." When the companions heard this praise, every one of them prayed that the Prophet meant him with this praise and sincere recommendation. Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with, narrated, "Thus I have never craved command in my life except that day, in hope that I would be the man whom the Prophet held in such high esteem. Therefore I went in intense heat to perform the Madh'uun prayer. When the Prophet finished leading the prayer, he looked to his right, then to his left. I stood on my toes to draw his attention to me, yet he kept on looking around until he saw Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarraah and ordered him, "Go with them and judge in truth between them in the matters which they dispute." Afterwards, Abu Ubaidah travelled with them. The incident does not mean that Abu Ubaidah was the only one whom the Prophet trusted or appreciated. He was one of the companions who equally shared the Prophet's invaluable trust and generous appreciation, but he was the only one, or one of few, who qualified to be absent from Al-Madinah for his mission of calling people to accept Islam monotheism, for he was the perfect man for this assignment. He maintained his trustworthiness as a companion of the Prophet, and even after his death he upheld his responsibilities with admirable integrity. He adhered to the standard of Islam wherever he went, as a soldier in command with valor and esteem, and as a soldier under command with modesty and fairness. When Khalid ibn al-Walid was the commander of the Muslim armies in one of the great decisive battles, the first action of Umar ibn al-Khattab, the new caliph at the time, was to dismiss Khalid and assign Abu Ubaidah in his place. When Abu Ubaidah received the message from Umar, he decided to conceal his purport. He pledged with the messenger to keep it secret with great admirable asceticism, intelligence and fidelity. When Khalid achieved his great victory, and only then did Abu Ubaidah relay to him the message with extraordinary politeness. On reading, Khalid asked him, "May Allah bestow his mercy on you, Abu Ubaidah. What made you keep the message from me?" The trustworthy of the nation answered, "I was afraid lest it should cause any confusion that might affect the army's morale. We do not crave life or its splendor. We are brothers before Allah." Thus Abu Ubaidah was assigned as the commander-in-chief in Syria. His army was the mightiest and best equipped among Muslim armies. You could hardly distinguish him from the rank and file of the army. He was always unassuming. When he heard that the people of Syria were infatuated by him and by his new rank, he asked them to assemble, then addressed them saying, "Fellow men, I am a Muslim from the Quraysh. I will follow any of you like his shadow, regardless of the colour of his skin, if he is more pious and righteous than me." May Allah greet you, Abu Ubaidah. May Allah bless the religion that refined you and the Prophet who instructed you. He said that he was a Muslim from the Quraysh. His religion was Islam and his tribe was Quraysh. For him, this suffice was identification. His being a commander-in-chief, the leader of the greatest Muslim army in number, equipment and victory, and the obeyed and respected ruler of Syria were not privileges in themselves. He was not ensnared by the web of conceit or haughtiness. As a matter of fact, all these titles and high positions were the means to a sublime ultimate end. One day the commander of the faithful visited Syria and asked those who were at his reception, "Where is my brother?" They asked, "Who do you mean?" He answered, "Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarraah." Soon Abu Ubaidah arrived and hugged him. Then he invited him to his house, where he had no furniture. In fact, he had nothing but a sword, a shield, and a saddlebag. Uthmaan asked him, smiling, "Why don't you furnish your house, as people do?" Abu Ubaidah readily answered, "O commander of the faithful, as you see, I have a room to sleep in, and that is enough for me." One day, as the commander of the faithful, Umar al-Faruq, was conducting the affairs of the vast Muslim world, he received the sad news of Abu Ubaidah's death. He tried to control himself, but his sadness got the better of him, and his tears flowed. He asked Allah to bestow his mercy on his brother. He recalled his memories with Abu Ubaidah, may Allah be pleased with him, with patience and tenderness. He explained, "If I were to make a wish, I would have wished a house full of men just like Abu Ubaidah. The trustworthy of the nation died in the land which he had purified from the paganism of the Persians and the oppression of the Romans. Today in Jordan lie his noble remains, which once were full of life, goodness and satisfaction. It does not matter if you know where he is buried or not, for if you want to find his grave, you will find no guide. You will need no guide. The fragrance of his remains will lead you to it." Allahu Akbar. MashaAllah. We'll continue now with Uthmaan ibn Madh'uun, a monk whose hermitage was life. If you attempt to arrange the Prophet's companions in the orders of their embracing Islam, Uthmaan ibn Madh'uun will be number 14. Not only was he the first Muhajir to die in Al-Madinah, but also the first Muslim to be buried in Al-Baqi. The glorious companion whose life story you are about to hear was a great monk. By monk here, I mean a worshipper throughout life, not a monk sequestered in his hermitage, for life with all its commotion, turmoil, burdens and virtues was his hermitage. Life to him meant perseverance in the way of truth and unremitting self-denial, good and righteousness. When we go back in time, when the fresh early rays of Islam were emanating from the Prophet's heart, peace be upon him, and from his words said in secret and seclusion, Uthmaan ibn Madh'uun was there. He was one of the few who rushed to the way of Allah and supported the Prophet. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, ordered the few oppressed believers to emigrate to Abyssinia, he wanted to save them from the Quraysh oppression, while he chose to be left behind to face it alone. Uthman, who was at the head of the first group of fugitives, was accompanied by his son Sa'ib. They sent their faces towards a faraway land, fleeing the plots of Abu Jahl, Allah's enemy, and the Quraysh's atrocities. The emigration of Uthmaan ibn Madh'uun, and likewise for the rest of the emigrants to Abyssinia in the first and second emigrations, only made him hold more firmly to his Islam. Defiantly, the two emigrations to Abyssinia represented a unique and glorious phenomenon in the cause of Islam. For those who believed in Muhammad, peace be upon him, and followed the light that had been sent down to him, and had enough paganism, error and ignorance, their common sense shunned the idolatry of state statues made of rocks and clay. When these fugitives emigrated to Abyssinia, they found an already prevalent, highly disciplined religion with an established clerical hierarchy of bishops and priests. Notwithstanding their attitude towards this religion, it was definitely remote from both the familiar paganism practiced back home and the usual idolatrous rites they had left. Undoubtedly, the clergy in Abyssinia exerted much effort to lure those immigrants to apostatize and embrace Christianity. In spite of all this, those immigrants stood steadfast in their profound loyalty to Islam and to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. They actually yearned for the day when they would return to their beloved country so as to worship Allah and support the great Prophet, peace be upon him, in the mosque in peacetime and in the battlefield, when the power of disbelief forced them to take arms. Thus those immigrants who lived in Abyssinia felt secure and peaceful. Uthmaan ibn Madh'uun was one of them, yet his expatriation did not make him forget his cousin Umayyah ibn Khalif's plots and the abuse he dealt with him and other Muslims. Hence he used to amuse himself by rehearsing threats to him, saying, "I hope that all the arrows you aim will miss their targets and strike back at you. You fought against generous and noble people and tortured them to death. You will soon be punished, and the common people you used to despise will get back at you." While the immigrants were, despite their exile, wrapped up in their worship of Allah and the study of the Quran, news spread that the Quraysh had submitted themselves to Islam and prostrated themselves to Allah, the One, the Irresistible. Hurriedly driven by their nostalgic feeling, the emigrants packed up their belongings and hastened to Mecca. However, no sooner had they reached Mecca's outskirts than they realized that the news about the Quraysh submission to Islam was only the bait to lure them to return. Suddenly they realized that their excess credulity had led them right into this trap. Yet there was nothing they could do, for Mecca was in sight and there was no escape whatsoever. Mecca's unbelievers were overjoyed to hear their long-awaited prey was caught in the trap that they laid. At that time, the right of protection, to be under the assistance, support, refuge and protection of his patron, was a sacred and honoured Arab tradition. Consequently, if a weak man had a claim on a man of high standing, he would instantly enjoy the privilege of the right of protection and would be under the invincibility, protection and safety. Naturally, not all of those who returned to Mecca had claims on a high-ranking man. Therefore, few enjoyed the protection and safety guaranteed by this right. Among those who did was Uthmaan ibn Madh'uun, who had a claim on Walid ibn al-Mughira. Hence he entered Mecca safely and peacefully, and attended its councils without being humiliated or harmed. Yet every time Ibn Madh'uun, the man who had been refined by the Quran and whom the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught and disciplined, or disciples, looked around, he saw his weak, poor Muslim brothers, who had no claim on the right of protection, being atrociously abused and unjustly haunted, while he sat safe and sound in his sanctuary, away from the least provocation. His free spirit rebelled and his noble compassion got the better of him. Hence he decided to throw aside Al-Walid's patronage and take off his shoulders this burdensome sanctuary that deprived him of the bliss of enduring abuse in the way of Allah, and following his Muslim brothers, who were the believing vanguard and the glad tidings of the world that would afterwards overflow with faith, monotheism and light. Let us now call an eyewitness to narrate what occurred. When Uthmaan ibn Madh'uun saw the affliction that had befallen the Prophet's companions while he was free and safe under Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira's protection, he said to himself, "By Allah, I realize now that I have a fatal flaw in my character, for here I am sound under the protection of a disbeliever, while my brothers and companions are being abused and tortured by disbelievers." Instantly he hastened to Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira and spoke, "Abu Shams, you have been a dutiful friend. You did your utmost to honour the ties of kinship, but now I must forsake my claim on you." Al-Walid asked him, "Why, nephew? Did any of my people lay a finger on you?" He answered, "No, but I am fully satisfied with Allah's protection and sanctuary, and I do not want to resort to anyone but him. So please come with me to the mosque and withdraw your protection and support in public." They both hastened to the mosque. Then Al-Walid cried out, Uthman has asked me to withdraw my protection and support from him. Uthman said he was indeed a loyal, dutiful and generous patron, but I do not like to resort to the protection and help of anyone but Allah. As Uthman was leaving, Ubaidah ibn Rabi was sitting in one of the Quraysh's meeting recited poetry. So he decided to join them and sat down and heard Ubaidah recite, Everything but Allah is falsehood. Uthman nodded and said, You spoke the truth. Ubaidah continued, Every blessing is transient. Uthman objected, saying, You are a liar, for the blessing of paradise are eternal. Ubaidah said, Oh, you Quraysh, by Allah, I have not heard before that anyone dared to call a man who was attending your meeting names. A man of Quraysh explained, Do not pay attention to what he says, for he is a fool who has turned apostate. Uthman objected to the man's insult, and both quarrelled until the man lost his temper and punched Uthman's eye ruthlessly. Nearby was Al-Walid ibn Madh'uun, who saw what had happened, and said, Oh, by Allah, Nephew, you could have spared yourself the pain if you had stayed under the invulnerable protection. Uthman answered, On the contrary, my healthy eye yearns for the pain of my abused eye. I am under the protection of Allah, who is far better and more capable than you. Abu Abshams Al-Walid urged him, saying, Come on, nephew, be sensible and return to my sanctuary and protection. Ibn Madh'uun said firmly, No. After he left, the pain in his eye was severe, yet his spirit was revived, strengthened, and reassured. On his way home, he recited, I don't care if a deluded disbeliever hurt my eye, for if it was the way of Allah, for the most merciful will reward me on the reckoning in compensation for it. My people, if Allah attempts to please someone, then he will be undoubtedly a happy man. Even if you say that I am a misguided fool, my life will always be consecrated to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, religion. I will always do my utmost to please Allah for our religion, as the only truth despite abuse and oppression. Thus he set an example that was highly becoming of him. In fact, life witnessed the remarkable scene of an excellent man whose graceful, immortal words will resound, By Allah, my healthy eye yearns to be heard in the way of Allah. I am under the protection and care of someone far better than more capable than you. Obviously, the scenario of Uthman's abuse at the hands of the Quraysh, after he had announced Al-Walid's protection, was premeditated on his part. He provoked it and was overjoyed by it, for his abuse was to him like the fire that matures, purifies, and ennobles his faith. At last he followed the footsteps of his believing brothers who did not accept intimidation. Afterwards, Uthman decided to emigrate to Al-Madinah, where he would not be haunted or harassed by Abjal, Abu Lahab, Umayyah, Utbah, or any of the other ruthless disbelievers who abused and tormented the Muslims. He travelled to Al-Madinah with those great companions who survived the hardships, terrors and horror of the trials with admirable steadfastness and stoutness. They did not emigrate to Al-Madinah to rest. On the contrary, Al-Madinah was the springboard that enabled Muslims to strive in the way of Allah all over the world, clinging to Allah's flag and spreading his words, signs and guidance. When Uthman had settled in the illuminated Medina, his remarkable great qualities were unveiled. He ultimately emerged as an ascetic, devout and repentant worshipper. To sum up, he was the glorious and intelligent monk who was not sequestered in his hermitage, but rather in life. He spent his life striving in the way of Allah. Indeed, he was the worshipper by night and the fighter by day. In fact, he was the worshipper and fighter of both night and day. Although all the prophets, peace be upon him, companions at that time were inclined to asceticism and devoutness, yet Ibn Madh'uun had a certain strategy in that respect, for he was so remarkable, absorbed in his asceticism and devoutness, that he turned his life, day and night, into perpetual blessed prayer and a sweet long glorification. No sooner had he sipped the sweetness of the engrossment in worship than he hastened to abandon all the enticing luxury and splendour of life. Therefore, he wore nothing but coarse clothes and ate nothing but coarse food. One day he walked into the mosque in which the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his companions were sitting, and he had on a faded, worn-out garment that was patched with a piece of fur. As soon as the Prophet, peace be upon him, saw him, He sympathized with him, and the companion's eyes were filled with tears. Yet the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Would you like it if you were rich enough to have many garments as you like and as much food as you like? Would you like your upholstery to be as expensive as the clothes used to cover the Kaaba?" The companions answered, "We would indeed. We would like to live in luxury, surrounded by the splendors of life." The Prophet, peace be upon him, commented, "You will be wealthy, but you are today far better in your piety and devoutness than you will when you are wealthy." Naturally, when Ibn Madh'uun heard the Prophet's words, he clung more and more to his austere and coarse life. He went so far as to renounce sexual intercourse with his wife. Yet when the Prophet, peace be upon him, heard about his exaggerated attitude, he summoned him and said, "Your wife has the right to sexual intercourse with you." The Prophet, peace be upon him, loved him dearly. When his pure spirit was embarking on its journey towards heaven, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was next to him, paying his last farewell to his first muhajir to die in Al-Madinah, and the first to be raised to paradise. He leaned to kiss his forehead, and his amiable eyes flowed with tears and wet. Uthman's face, which looked remarkably graceful. The Prophet, peace be upon him, paid his last farewell to his beloved companion by saying, "Allah bestow his mercy on you, Abu as-Sa'ib. You are now leaving life that was not able to seduce or mislead you." The revered Prophet, peace be upon him, did not forget his companion after his death. On the contrary, he often mentioned and praised him. For instance, his very last words to his daughter Ruqayya on her deathbed were, "Go on following the pious and devout Uthman ibn Madh'uun's footsteps up to paradise." MashaAllah. What a beautiful story. And that comes the end to this evening. Please join us to halalradio 1, where we continue the stories of these magnificent men throughout this next 2 weeks left in Ramadan. If you do have any issues and need to ask any questions, please email us at halalradio. We do have a qualified imam who is willing to offer advice and answer questions according to the hadiths and Quran. Until tomorrow, salam alaikum.